Salvation, radio is
I want to tell you about Texas radio and the Big B.
It was a warm summer night with our song playing on the radio.
Today we have a really special guest on I Remember Radio. This is Dick Lyons, and there's another Dick. His name is Heatherton. Dick Heatherton, one of my favorite people. I have to admit that he and I have known each other for over 20 years and worked together. And Dick has a very interesting past that I thought we'd look at today. Hi, Dick. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Richard. Good to see you.
Good to see you, too. Tell me about your start in radio. How did you get started?
My dad, back in New York, was on Broadway for many, many years. And then after World War II, he got into radio. And as a kid, I listened to him and I loved it. He was doing a morning show on WOR, replacing a team rambling with gambling. And he had other shows there. And my dad, no, you got to sleep. So I would stay up all night long just so I could go on into New York. I lived on Long Island and watch my dad just do his show. It was, to me, it was magic. It was something special. And I loved it. And I fell in love with it at the age of 6 or 7.
Wow. When was your first air job? When did you get a job on the radio?
First job I had was at a radio station known as WFYI, for your information, on Long Island, Herald Tribune Radio. And it was at 1520 on the dial. Now, since most of what we're talking about is West Coast, let me just give a little history to people who really haven't spent too much time in the great Northeast. There was a station up in Buffalo, New York, which is about 400 miles away from the New York, Long Island area. And it was 50,000 watts. It was so powerful because you go 60 miles west of Buffalo, you couldn't hear it. It had regular listeners in England, in Poland, and again with the bounce, it used to even interfere with a station in Portland, Oregon. I think KEW, I'm not too sure the call letters. So needless to say, only being 400 miles away, and I would do the show Heatherton's Hootenanny, starting at about 3:45. The sun would go down, probably like around 4:30, but you'd start hearing WKBW underneath. And by about 4:15, even though we had another 15 minutes to go, people would be calling up and it's like, WFYI, get the hell off the air. We want to hear KB. I mean, KB was so strong that it was like number 6 in New York at night with Joey Reynolds. And before that, there was a fellow by the name of Dan Neverth. It was like number 1 up in Portland, Maine, number 3 in Philadelphia, number 5 or 6 in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, all the way down to Charlotte, North Carolina. It covered it. That was my experience. So you had to have a strong constitution to be able to get the hell out of here. We don't want to hear you. There was nothing. Nobody cared about WFYI.
Where did you go from there?
From there, I went to a station, WBIC on Long Island. It was 250 watts. And Richard, even though it was a daytimer, it could be heard up in Boston and all the way down to Baltimore. New Haven, Hartford, Springfield, Massachusetts. It was great. It was a daytimer, and I was doing that and working my way through college at the same time. And then from there, went to my first full-time station, and that was WGLI. And WGLI was a 1290 on the dial, and there was a 1300 up in New Haven, which was maybe, as the crow flies, maybe 40, 50 miles away. And there was a 1280 in New York. So at night, you couldn't go too far. So maybe like about 6 or 7 miles. But because it was so directional and it would head out to the Atlantic Ocean, I had more listeners in Bermuda than I did on Long Island. It was great. It was, yeah, I'm calling from Hamilton, Bermuda. Could you play such and such? It was great. It was wonderful.
What was the format, Dick?
It was a top 40 station. It was my first real top 40 station. I loved it. I loved it.
You remember any contests or promotions, or your character? Was it just straight Dick Heatherton?
It was just, Dick Heatherton. That was it. No, and since I was on at night, 7 to midnight, they weren't doing many contests at that time. It was more during the daytime, because nighttime, who cares?
So from there, where did you go?
From there, I went to WPOP in Hartford.
There we go, the big time.
Oh, it was wonderful. It was Boss Radio. Everything back in the 60s was Boss Radio and doing your own version. WPOP 1410. And I worked with some great guys. And it was fun. We'd be playing basketball. We'd be doing all sorts of different promos. And again, with the signal. I always loved the signal. We couldn't get down to New Haven, like 30, 40 miles away. But I had regular listeners in Philadelphia, Charlotte, North Carolina, and Jacksonville, Florida. It was like amazing. In fact, because I was at POP and at the time I was doing nighttime, then I went to afternoon drive, the program director at WFIL in Philadelphia heard me, and that's how I wound up in Philadelphia at FIL. And FIL, in its own way, even though it was different than KHJ in Los Angeles, was the KHJ of the East Coast. It was tight, it was fun, and the guys, we were all together. It was just fabulous. Dr. Don Rose, who really wasn't so much in Los Angeles as he was in San Francisco, he went from Philadelphia up there, and he was a legend in San Francisco for many, many years. George Michael, he used to have a sports show in Washington, and we played on a lot of stations around the country, at night on Sundays. And Long John Wade, again, he wasn't an LA guy, and there was a guy, Tom Tyler, little guy, but his pipes. He was the Gary Owens of the East Coast. You see this guy, hey, how you doing, Tom? I'm doing fine. It was great. Had a lot of fun there, and then from there, went down to KLIF in Dallas.
That was a big station.
I was 1190. Interesting thing, Richard. Again, I started at night and then I went to afternoon drive. While on at night, of course, I'd take some dedications or what have you. And I'd start getting some phone calls. Hi, yeah, I'm calling from Jacksonville, Florida, and we hear you. I said, oh, yeah. So, are you the Dick Heatherton, the leader of Lasagna Land, the Prince of Pastrami people, the king of Kielbasa country? That's what I was known as up in Hartford. Played very, very, I said, yeah, that was me. Oh, yeah, we used to listen to you up in Hartford. Oh, were you in Hartford? No, we used to hear you down in Jacksonville. One of the things about the East Coast radio as compared to the West Coast has the mountains. Sure, you might be able to hear San Francisco, and you'd probably hear Como up in Washington, but pretty much everything was flat. So you could hear Philadelphia, you could hear Baltimore, DC, Detroit, Buffalo, sometimes even St. Louis. It was like, oh my God, WLS, the Silver Dollar Survey, listen to all these jocks. It was like going to school and hearing other people how they should be doing what they're doing.
And what kind of promotions did these stations do? Like FIL is a very competitive market in Philadelphia. There's Wibbage,
WIBG, and that's it. Of course, the cash call, what have you. I was listening to, one of your previous interviews with Al. I can't recall his last name.
Anthony.
Yeah, great. And he was very promotion oriented. I can't really recall too many. I mean, we do the cash call kind of things to call out, but there was nothing really that I can recall that really stood out. We did a lot of appearances. That was it. And we were really challenging Wibbage 990 on the dial, AM 990, Joe Niagara, and all Philadelphia people. And one of the things about, Philly, at Wibbage, they were all Philly people. In many ways, we were travelers. From here, we were on our way to hopefully to New York, or Jim Nettleton, who wound up at WABC. Philly was, even though I loved it, it was one of my favorite stations, all I wanted to do was get to New York. And then eventually Los Angeles.
So how did you break into New York radio? Because you were at WCBS in New York?
I got CBS FM.
CBS FM. What shift were you doing?
There was a guy when I was in Philadelphia. He was a management trainee. His name was John Garin. God bless him. And a buddy of mine, J.J. Jeffrey, who became a big mainstay in Chicago after working in Philadelphia before that, WRKO Boston. We used to take out the management trainees for a couple of beers. Everybody, hey, how you doing? Get out of my life. And he just seemed like a nice guy. Guess who wound up being the program director at CBS FM? John Garin. And I'd left KLIF in Dallas, and I'm looking for a job. And so I called. I said, "Hey, John, I'm looking for something. Can you help me, please?" And he said, "Well, wait a couple of weeks. Let's see what happens." I said, "Okay, maybe it's a nice way of saying." So I called. I said, "Okay, you're on midday." Oh, wow.
New York City, the #1 market in the country.
Oh, I loved it. I did that for a couple of weeks, and then I went to Afternoon Drive, and I did that for 14 years. And New York is an oldies town, very, very much so. So it's also a very ethnic town. So I became leader of Lasagna Land. Remember, this is the 60s. You talk about this in 2021, and people say, "What's the matter with you?" I was Prince of Pastrami people, Century for the Soul Society, really played it local. And there used to be a guy in New York, Joe O'Brien. And some of these names, I apologize, they really weren't West Coast people. But I remember listening to Joe O'Brien on WMCA, and he always played it ethnic, and I never forgot that. So I would play it, to the hilt. Leader of Lasagna Land, Prince of Pastrami people, whatever. And wherever I go, "Hey, Lasagna Land, how you doing?" I was very New York. And years after I left CBS FM, I'd go in, New York is still home. And I go into someplace and, maybe I'm ordering something. Listen, "Aren't you Dick Heatherton, king of Kielbasa country?" Yeah. Now this is 4, 5, 7, 10 years after I'd left New York, but it was something different. And hey, in many ways, you got to have a gimmick. And that was my promotion. I wish I could help you with promotions, but I really can't think of any that I used to do, Richard.
I think it's a West Coast thing, maybe. You didn't give away any cars or anything?
No, I did that when I was running some stations in Pennsylvania. After working at KCBS FM, when it was an oldie station, I had an opportunity to run some stations in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, home of the Little League. They told me, the stations need a little help. They'd already sunk. But it is what it is. It was my first opportunity. And I got to tell you, when the door closed and I was in my office, I said, "Oh my God, what am I going to do now?" Oh. And I called a guy who was the program director at KISS, Jerry DeFrancesco, I think his name was. And I said, "I know you don't know me, but hey, I hope maybe you can help me. I just took a job as a general manager in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And I'm sure you had some similar experiences when you first started. What was it like? What should I expect?" And Jerry DeFrancesco said, "Pray." And it was like, oh my God, okay. And he said, "Hey, just take it easy, what have you." I called Paul Drew. who ran KHJ, and he ran, so many stations for the Drake organization. And when I come on back to LA, I'd have a little lunch or breakfast with Paul Drew. He was very, very helpful. And he told me something that was really very interesting, and that was when he started, programming for Drake, the reason he was so tough, he didn't want anybody to know he wasn't too sure what he was doing. And to be able to say that, I mean, you got to be sure of yourself to be able to talk about things like that. I'll never forget Jerry DeFrancesco and Paul Drew. They were very, very helpful to me. My wife at the time came out to Williamsport. She said, "This is not for me." So it was like I was doing a lot of traveling back to LA from Williamsport and what have you. I brought out my two little girls and my wife. Schools aren't good here. Forget it. Come on back when you want. So after a little more than a year, I came back to LA, and then I wound up doing stuff at Unistar, Transtar, and Westwood One. And there was a guy who was very, very helpful to me. He used to be on KLOS and KGBS. Richard Lyons.
That's
Richard,
me.
you saved my Irish butt, and you know it. I was trying to do anything and everything I possibly could, and you were kind enough to give me afternoon drive down at K-Ocean. I will never forget that.
Well, it was. I just want to tell you a little bit about my side of that story. I had the station in Orange County, and I think the headlines in the magazine was from worst to first, but I couldn't have done it without you. I had great DJs, a guy in the morning from San Francisco, KFRC, a gal Talaya, midday from The Wave, and you in the afternoon. And we had a powerhouse. I think we had the Love Guy on at night.
The Love
Guy
Guy
with a really super deep voice at night in the dark. But we really pounded that. And you saved my ass.
Oh.
You did so many great things, so many wonderful promotions with me. I can't help but remember one in particular that really stands out. I was pitching the Four Seasons Hotel, and they're like, well, why should we go with you? People come in from out of town. I said, well, your restaurants, you want local people in your restaurants. Well, that's true. I said, why don't we do a promotion every Thursday? I'll get a local charity to commit to 50 people showing up in your lounge. You have a little tiny hors d'oeuvre buffet, serve cocktails, and I'm going to make the charity guarantee me 50 people to come, and we'll get a local celebrity to come and make an appearance. So do you remember Buzz Aldrin, the second man on the moon?
Yep.
Yeah, he was there. Of course, some advertisers, the king of the big screen. Paul, I forgot his last name. He was a big screen TV dealer, the Jaguar dealer in town. But they all brought their friends. And we had all those people from the charity, and you would interview them between records and give them promotion. And the Four Seasons loved it because these charities would have parties, every year. And they booked the Four Seasons because they loved appetizers and the service, and it's a beautiful hotel. And then we had about $5,000 in trade a month that we ate like kings. And it was a terrific deal. And you pulled it off. It was one of those things where you stood there in the lobby bar and people were all over the place, and you did a radio show. And after the commercials or before them, you'd interview one of the people from a charity that was local. And it just worked like a charm. People were listening. They'd come over. Hey, there's a party going on at the Four Seasons. And we wouldn't get thousands of people, but we might have had a few hundred at a time sometimes. It got pretty crowded. So that was a huge success. We did that for a long time. And it promoted K-Ocean.
It was fun. You made it easy for me. You really, really did. And I had done the announcing and the warm-up for a couple of game shows while I was in New York, and that helped me with my remotes, or when I was working with you at K-Ocean. because you got to think on your feet, you got to have stuff down. And also Dick Clark was very, very helpful because it was the $50,000 pyramid, 100,000 went up from there. And I would, for a period of almost a year, I would either be sick on Wednesdays when we taped, or I would use some of my vacation time so I could do, 1 week's worth of $50,000, $100,000 question, which was like about 3 blocks away from where CBS was. Anyway, it all worked together.
I remember you coming to me and saying, look, I have a weekend job in LA.
Oh,
Do you mind if I use a different name? What radio station was that?
it was funny. Again, things were a little on the tight side. I worked for you, and you said, yeah, if you want to work at other stations, fine, but you're not Dick Heatherton. So I was working with Transtar, Unistar, Westwood One. I can't recall what the incarnation was at the particular time. So I could use my name. It was like an MOR format, adult standards. I would be on KMPC, and I used another name. I was on KXEZ, and I was Steve O'Brien, who's one of my best friends. He used to work at WNBC, WABC, YNY, what have you, CKLW. And so Steve O'Brien. And I remember coming in on Monday, and you called me into your office and said, hey, I was listening to the radio this past weekend. And there's a guy, he sounded very good. He sounded, his voice quality was very similar to yours. Do you know Steve O'Brien? I said, he's a very good guy. Very good guy. I kept my word, never used my name, Dick Heatherton. And also KFI. I was working, trying to recall, something like 22, 23 hours out of 48 hours every weekend.
Oh my God.
I'd go from one station to another. And the only way that I could do it is I had to stand up. If I sat down, I just fall asleep. And I remember that from a promotion when I was in Hartford. And I was coming into the market. So all the jocks, they left. And so part of the promotion, you have to find this guy, that guy, this guy. And the only way that I could do it is by standing up. If I sat down, I just
go to sleep.
Stand up, you can do it for a much longer time than if you're sitting down. Anyway, that's some of the stuff.
Well, there's like a lot of energy there. You have tremendous energy, and you do characters. You had a character that you did up in Buffalo. Was it Buffalo or Syracuse?
Oh, yeah. Well, this was Rochester.
Rochester.
I went out to be sales manager in Rochester, New York. Great city. New York and LA, we think that everything is flyover area. And every once in a while, you find some places where there's beams of light, very, very bright.
Like San Bernardino.
San Bernardino in its own way, when you were there. For me, it was Rochester, New York. It's a big musical town, very literate. And I became Captain Kilowatt of the Lost Radio Rangers, And I was doing the sales, but Rochester's the kind of place that's almost like New England, even though New England is probably like 350 miles away. If you're not from Rochester, New York, Ra-cha-cha, you're not getting any sales at all. And I think you went through the same experience in San Francisco when you left LA. If you don't smell like you belong, you don't belong. They don't want to know anything about you.
So we call it they're provincial. They're into their own people, their own thing.
Lovely place, great Italian food. I should have been born Italian. I mean, it was wonderful in that way. But Captain Kilowatt. Anyway, there was you mentioned upstate New York. When I was in my beginning years at FYI and 1520, there used to be a guy, Joey Reynolds. He was the guy, like either number 1, number 3, number 5 at night along the East Coast. And he was also very, very helpful to me. And the guy's now on WOR doing a show. Once you're a jock, you're always a jock. Even if you're going into sales or management or what have you, you bring your talents with you.
And it's a brotherhood. We were all brothers.
Yeah.
There wasn't very many women radio people, though. There's a few in LA that I could name. Ty Holiday at KRLA and Carrie Tombazian, of course, at the Wave. Later on, she was a tremendous talent.
Carrie, what a voice.
Oh, the best. And I think she may still be on the Wave at night. I'm not sure. But it's been a great career, radio. And this is a really great opportunity to talk to you. And I bet when you were at WCBS in New York, that was sort of like riding a Ferrari, like a rocket ship. What was it, 50,000 watts, 100,000 watts?
CBS FM you're talking?
Yeah, CBS FM, a big, big signal.
Well, it didn't need a big signal because it had such a population. In fact, there was a 101.1 CBS FM in Philadelphia. So because of the large population, it was short-sticked. It didn't really go like that far down into New Jersey. But I guess even though I never thought this would occur in FM, because it was short-sticked, we'd have regular listeners or semi-regular listeners in Missouri. And it's like, what? I said, no, seriously, yeah, give a listen. Yeah, we got you on right now. Crazy.
What was the jock lineup at CBS FM?
We had Harry Harrison, who was legendary in New York. He had been on WMCA, then he went to WABC, and he came to us just a real gentleman, a pro. And he was just a good guy. And then Ron Lundy, what was the movie with John Voight?
Midnight Cowboy?
Yeah. You'd hear a Ron Lundy, good morning, and he had been a giant in St. Louis WIL before coming to New York. He was at WABC for many, many years. Dan Ingram, he came after I left. It was a good crew.
I worked with Ron Lundy at K-Rock AM in Burbank. He was on Afternoon Drive, and he was a great guy, real powerful jock, really got it going. And he was wonderful. They brought in a lot of East Coast jocks at K-Rock at the time. They were competing with Boss Radio. And we were in constant contest, giving away trips to Hawaii every other hour.
Oh, wow.
Cars. And my friends were calling me saying, hey, give it to me. Let me win, and I'll sell it and split it with you. This is my career radio. I would be ruined in radio if that ever came out, or probably go to jail, or both. So it's been a wild ride, and I think you've been on one too, with all these stations you work for. Do you have a favorite other than K-Ocean?
Believe me, I love that. And one of the things that I liked about K-Ocean, I worked for you a second time, also at K-Ocean, when I got into sales. And I've said this to you for more than 20 years. You are the best pickpocket I have ever met when it comes to sales. People don't know what hit them when they see Richard Lyons, Richard Poppers, or what have you. You give the people what they want, and in the meanwhile, you're getting what you want. I thought I knew about sales watching you. Whoa, I'm serious, and I'm not trying to do this mutual affection network.
It was all for the greater good, Dick. I wanted them to be successful, and I wanted them to use our radio station to do that. So we all profited. One thing about sales, and this being a guy that played both sides of the fence, is that nobody gets paid unless there's sales. So you have to create the money, and the illusion that radio brings. Tell me about a station you worked at where there was really an illusion with the listeners for the whole station. The oldies format at CBS FM. I don't know what FIL was like, or Wibbage. they seem to be really hot top 40 stations. Boss radio versus regular rock radio with the echo chamber at Cliff in Dallas. Tell me about, did you know Jim Wood, who was at Cliff and had a 60 share at night? He was one of the biggest DJs and a big DJ out here. And Humble Harv copied his act at Boss Radio.
Oh, yeah. He worked at Wibbage in Philly, sure.
Right. So in all these communities where you lived and worked, what was your favorite station other than K-Ocean? 14 years at CBS FM must have really been a trip.
I loved it. Being home, you know. I remember I was doing an interview with John Lennon.
Really?
My mother called and she said, yeah, what's the weather going to be like? So
She called you.
I said, Mom, hold on a second. I got a guest here. And I said, would you give my mother, just give the weather. And so in New York, it's hazy, hot, and humid, you know, this afternoon. Hazy, warm, and humid tonight. That's it. High 80, low 60. It doesn't change. You might get some rain or what have you. So, you know, John Lennon gave that and said, oh, thank you. Well, who are you? So, well, my name is John Lennon. And my mom, she knew a little bit about rock and roll, but a little bit, well, thank you. And later on the night, Mom, do you know who that was? Sullivan and John? Yeah, he's one of the Beatles. Oh, my God. But it was good. You know, if you could have some fun with the people. I remember I had the Beach Boys on. And so I had to do a commercial. And I started it and I turned it. It wasn't Brian Wilson. I can't recall the other Wilson. I said, hey, I'm tired of doing commercials. Read this. So I had him doing the commercial. And I think it wasn't for Crazy Eddie, which prices are insane. But anyway, I tried to get the people involved, even with the guests. It was fun.
What other guests did you interview? I never heard these stories before about the Beatles, the Beach Boys. You had a lot of celebrities come into New York that wanted publicity.
They would come. It was good. It was fun. It was Stevie Wonder. I remember Stevie loved radio. I remember, you know, in between radio, and I was going to college at Pepperdine, and so paying my way a little bit, I was in PR, and so I would take Stevie Wonder to stations, you know, BMR. B. Mitchell Reed was at KFWB before he went on to KMET. Bob Dayton was at KBLA.
I worked with him.
Oh, really? Worked with him at CBS FM. And I had mentioned to Bob Dayton, I said, hey, is there any chance that you could maybe let Stevie, you know, get on the air? I said, yeah. Well, Stevie Wonder started, he really got into it. He loved it, you know, just being able to be on the air, you know, introducing a couple of songs. That was it. That's all he wanted to do. No interview or what have you. Yeah, Stevie Wonder on KBLA 1500. He was so thankful. He loved it. Then, of course, he went on to buy KJLH. And
you know what KJLH means?
Joy, love, happiness.
Right. Kindness, joy, love, and happiness.
Wow. Yeah.
That's so cool. That's sort of an inside story. I don't know how many people really know that.
I love it. Hey, getting back to what you were saying, I love the station KJUL. Wasn't top 40. It was in Las Vegas. Soft AC. And I love the people. It was great. But a typical radio story, sometimes you fall in love with the format. The owner, fellow by the name of Scott Gentry, great guy, loved him. The people, I mean, one of my favorite places, it had no signal. 100,000 watts up in Moapa Valley, which is about 55 miles outside of Vegas, and it didn't really cover the market. And I was doing sales. And oh my God, that was tough. But I loved it. CBS FM FIL, I'd have to say, probably was my favorite place.
In Philadelphia.
Oh, God, it was great. CBS FM. It was good. It was very good. You try to enjoy where you are, what you're doing. I'd say probably my least favorite was KLIF.
In Dallas.
And one of the reasons had nothing to do with the station. I had left FIO. They placed me in between successes. I'm not a midday guy at that age. I was more afternoon driver at nighttime, and I didn't really fit that time. But I felt so down. And so I went on to KLIF. So a lot had to do with me, not them.
What shift did you do at WFIL?
I did midday when I was at WFIL. And I did it on the weekends. I do like 6 to 9, 6 to 10, what have you. And I really felt like I was doing something at that time. I didn't understand midday.
So what's your secret to success at CBS FM for 14 years? I've never been at a radio station for 14 years, nor do I know many other radio personalities that last 14 years at one radio station.
Reaching out to the people, doing a lot of appearances.
Tell me about some of the appearances you did. Where did you appear? What did you do when you got there?
The Beacon Theater, Madison Square Garden. You're going to hospitals, doing anything and everything you possibly can, and getting the word out. And then a new general manager came in, and she didn't like my act. And so now for an Irish guy to be fired on March 17th, that hurts.
St. Patty's Day.
That pissed me off. But I was, Richard, at that point, I had been playing the oldies for going on 14 years. And when you're playing every other day, Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow by the Shirelles, my mind was turning into mush. I needed something else. And I started I just wasn't happy. It's like, there's got to be more to life. And I found I was having more fun going out with the sales guys and maybe helping them. Sometimes I would take the lead after they'd show me what to do. And every once in a while, I'd even make a sale and they'd give me credit for it. I said, hey, this is fun. So when they said, hey, you want to get into sales? And I said, well, this might be good. Anyway, so my time came to an end at CBS FM after 14 years. And I said, oh, let me do it. So I went over to ABC to see if I could get into sales. I didn't know diddly about sales, and there was a guy, great guy, George, help me, his name will come, I'm sure, once we're through with this. And he was with McGavran Guild. He ran the office. And I said, well, I want to get into sales. And he said, get your ass off your head. This is what you're going to be doing. I have to get in there like 8:30 in the morning. And for like about 3-4 months, he would give me tests. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. And then I wound up at the Clock, KLOK, in San Jose and San Francisco. I owe a lot to George Pine. God love him.
So as a salesperson,
he got me into sales. And he said, the one thing you do, learn sales, but don't forget about the talents that you have built up having been a jock. So what I would do is when I go into a business, I would check it out, do whatever information I could get on the place. And before even seeing the client, I'd start writing a spot, because I did a lot of those things. So when I get to see the client, it helped a lot. It's like, hey, this may not be perfect, but from what I'm being able to pick up about your business and some of the history, and it helped me an awful lot in my sales career. Lead with the creative. I led with what I knew best, and that was the talent. And then I pick up from you and other people in sales, and it helped.
Tell me about the book you wrote. Dick wrote a book. And it was a terrific book. And I think it was just a few years ago you came out with it.
Out of the Fog and Into Focus. one of the things, being in talent, being on the air had sort of come to an end. But the thing is, you still love talent. And so I became a speaker. And the upside to downtimes, how to get from nowhere to KNOW, where. And so I'd be representing organizations, around the country. And I would use a lot of what I learned working with you when we were doing our promotions, when I was doing the warm up. And if I'd have something to say based on whatever the business was all about. And I love that. So I had an opportunity to interview a lot of people.
The guy in Texas that you went to see, who was a very famous motivational speaker in Texas, he used to fly into Dallas, or I can't remember the city, and rent a car and drive out to his ranch. He was a big motivational speaker.
Oh my God, Dr. Joe Vitale.
Yeah.
Dr. Joe was great. Yeah, he's still going strong, just outside of Austin, about 60 miles, Weatherly, and very, very good. He just helped me. I said, I want to write a book, but the thing is, what do I do? He said, well, you've been in radio, haven't you? I said, yeah. He said, well, what's a book? It's a longer commercial. Think of it that way. And it's like, that's it. I got it. So every chapter, in many ways, I constructed as if I were doing a commercial. And it helped, and I did that for quite a few years, and I may get back into it.
Let's talk for a second about a mentor of mine who I introduced you to. You became really great friends with. Radio genius, John Darren.
Oh.
And John Darren was the program director of KRLA.
Yeah.
When I met him out in Thousand Oaks, he was the program director and stood behind me after I graduated from radio school and told me how to work the board and be sure to have something to say when you come in and something to say when you get out, and play the record of the commercial, and whatever's in between, do your best. He was a tremendous teacher, a tremendous friend, and I know that you and he had a very close relationship.
Oh, thank you for introducing me. He was one of my best friends. We took to each other, and just naturally funny and intelligent. It was a native intelligence. And boy, so many memories. I remember my younger daughter, Dana, had an assignment. And so we did something, and John was able to create, who was it? Oh, John F. Kennedy. And I would be the announcer, and John would be JFK. And I can't recall exactly what the scenario was, but all I do know is that my daughter got an A+. So it worked. John was just great. In fact, when I left Rochester, in fact, this is a story in a story, so bear with me.
Go for it.
I'm leaving Rochester, New York, after doing about a year and a half there, what have you. Wanted to get back to LA. There was a lady that I also wanted to see, and I wanted to see my daughters. I'm driving, and it's like about 3:30 in the morning, and I don't know about you, but things are strange. But things are even stranger early in the morning. So I'm driving on, I think it was Interstate 90. And I'm entering, I don't know if it was Wyoming or North Dakota. And again, 3:30 in the morning, strange. It says, welcome to Gary Owens, North Dakota or / Wyoming. And it's like, I couldn't, but it's like, I'm sure if I went back there at 11 o'clock in the morning, it would be Smithville. But seeing Gary Owens, North Dakota or Wyoming at 3:30 in the morning, that just bordered on the bizarre. I'll never forget that. Anyway, I'm heading back to California and dropped by to see my other daughter who was at Berkeley. I came down to LA. And so whose place did I stay at? John Darren's. John put me up for a couple of months, and then I wound up working at KRLA, doing sales and what have you. And a guy that you and I both know, Bill Martinez, and has become a very good friend. And he really was very, very helpful to me in my sales career. He's a guy that also used his jock talents, even though he was then sales manager. Anyway, that's part of what I've been doing. That's part of what I did. And one thing about radio, you never grow up.
Never grow up.
In many ways, and I'm sure you get older, you get a little more mature, but you still have, at least for me and a lot of people that I know in the business, there is a childlike acceptance of something new. You want to try to find, oh, hey, that's good. It's because radio is something that has to be new. If it's not new, it's old. If it's old, people aren't listening. They want something new and exciting.
And the fellowship between disc jockeys and people that work at radio station, it's really a team. Which brings me back to John Darren for a second.
Please.
He later hired me at K-Rock to do weekends when he was the program director there, all the way from Thousand Oaks and KLOS in between and KGBS and all the other stations I'd worked for. And when I was at KBIG in LA, he came to visit me and we had a great time. But networking, you and John, I don't know about me, but we're the world's greatest networkers to stay in touch with all the radio people. You probably can give me a few names to call for people that want to do I Remember Radio. I'm sure you have some around because you're such a great networker.
Oh.
Tell me, how did you get that way? I mean, was this something you got from your dad? He was an orchestra leader. He had a morning radio show. I mean, obviously you shaped your beginning future in radio on that. And then you just get to know people and everybody gets along. It's like, and you help each other through the years as you have been and I have been.
I don't know. I mean, I like people, and that's part of it. My dad was also a radio guy. He used to be a WOR and WNBC. Like Sheriff John used to be here, which was KHJ TV in the old days. My dad was the Merry Mailman in New York at WOR TV, the RKO General Station there.
Very famous.
Oh, thank you. And the Merry Mailman was the guy going against Howdy Doody. He'd actually beat Howdy Doody at the same time. And it was great. And while I was in New York, I was also producing a show known as New Day Dawning, which was a musical variety informational show geared to the 50-plus audience. Now, this is going back to the 80s. And my dad was the host. And to work with and for my dad and to see him perform magic. My dad had a lilt, had a way. He used to be on Broadway. He introduced Where or When on Broadway. And another thing, just a quick thing about it, he started in a trio with a guy named Paul Whiteman. Remember back in the 50s, Paul Whiteman used to have a show. Well, way back in the 30s and 40s, he had a trio, Paul Whiteman. And my dad was part of it. And I'm trying to recall who the other guys were. A fellow by the name of Crosby and another guy by the name of Sinatra.
Oh, my.
And so, that was it. And then my dad got into radio and TV and what have you. But one thing always leads to another. And my dad always, enjoy what you're doing, never work. We've always heard about that, but sometimes when you hear it from another source, somebody close, it just means so much more. And that helped me. That helped me an awful lot. Performers, maybe I'm wrong, but it's been my experience, most performers are shy. The only non-introverted radio personality that I've ever met was Cousin Brucey. Everybody around the world, even though Bruce Morrow never worked in LA, Cousin Brucey. He's the he's a total extrovert.
He's still on in New York, I heard.
He used to be on XM Sirius, and they got rid of him, and now he's on WOR. So at night on Saturdays, Cousin Brucey. New York is a very nostalgic town. You know, I'm not saying that LA isn't, but more so in New York than LA. LA is, what's the next trend? What's the next trend? Let's do it. There are a few people that last forever, but on the whole, New York is an oldies town. A lot more respect. It takes maybe it took them a lot longer to say, get the hell out of Dodge. We've had it after 14 years.
I remember you going back for those reunions on, I think it was CBS FM. Did you go back and do radio shows like 10 years later, 20 years later? They had these reunions. Yeah. Tell me about those and how that felt to go back and be on New York radio again.
Last one I did, I guess, was maybe 5-6 years ago at CBS FM. And just the phones lit up. Hey, leader. Hey, Prince. You know, Heatherton, what's doing? And again, New York is an entirely different animal than Los Angeles. And I've been out here long enough. I've become much more of a California person than a New York. But to go back, it's warm. It's great. After doing a Sunday show, this one time, I went to a bar because the next day I was going to head on back. So I ordered a hamburger and Jack Daniels. You're Dick Heatherton. Oh my God! It's a whole different world there. I miss it, but I don't want to go back. What's not to love? I mean, here, this is what? March 9th, 2021. The sun's out, blue skies, and getting this almost every day. You can't beat it.
You really can't. Well, You can't beat Dick Heatherton either. Thank you for sharing your life on radio with us. I'm sure there's more you'll think of later. If you ever want to come back on, you're always welcome. And thank you for being a dear friend. And Dick has just been part of my family for all these years and really came to my rescue at K-Ocean. No budget, just hustle. And Dick was the front man and did a job that just nobody else would have done or could have done, and really helped me be successful in managing that radio station. That was really a thrill to work with you, Dick. And it's a thrill to have you on today.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Richard.
You did a great job. Thank you so much.
Take care. My pleasure.
You too. Bye-bye.
It was a